South Park Snow Day was developed by Question and published by THQ Nordic, in association, I believe, with South Park Digital Studios, and it releases tomorrow, Tuesday the 26th of March. It takes things in a completely different direction to the excellent South Park The Fractured But Whole, which released in 2017 from a different team, that being Ubisoft San Francisco. And whereas that was an RPG, this is more of an action-based dungeon crawler with a team-based element. But is it likely to receive a frosty reception? Well, let's find out. The narrative goes that the titular Snow Day's arrived, and Cartman is glued to his television set, watching the different atrocities that are playing out, but desperately hoping that school is going to be closed.
Multiple casualties! They're gonna cancel school! I just know they will!
Eric, this is very serious.
It makes for a fitting, relatable and quite funny start to the game. When the Snow Day is finally called, you'll then follow Cartman, the Grand Wizard, who has decided to host a new game with all of the inhabitants of the town, and in particular is aided by all the new kids, of which you are one. Literally.
Those other 3 kids they were playing with. Oh, those were the other new kids. They all think they're the actual new kid, but you're the only new kid that matters, right, new kid?
Whom Cartman informs is very important, but that if you play online you might be number 2 or 3, but you're just as important as you would be had you been number 1. The writing is very funny and familiar, and it's absolutely outrageous. If you're someone that's easily offended, this game is ready and waiting for you. South Park fans, you can guarantee this has not been watered down in any way, and on the contrary contains some lines that I absolutely couldn't mention because the channel will be shut down in about 5 minutes. To the point where I'm genuinely surprised they're actually allowed to put them into games. And that same ethos permeates every different mechanic in the game. As a new kid to this town, first you have to create your own character. There are a few different cosmetics to choose from, some different hats and glasses, and later on you'll actually be able to buy some with some of the currency, in-game currency that is. Cartman operates out of the hub area, right off of Main Street, and it's from here that he has his war table, from which he directs the different games. And you'll go to him to select one of the game's 5 different chapters, easy, medium or hard difficulty, and then head into game. Now it's designed for online multiplayer. There are options to drop in and out of your friends' games or join a random game online, but obviously pre-release there's no one online, so we can't actually test that aspect. If however you don't have many friends, it will actually generate bots for you. These are AI controlled companions, and I have to say they are surprisingly okay. Not only will they carry out the objectives, they'll also heal you, and they will need to heal you quite a lot if you're anything like I am. Typically stages do feel a little dated. They'll see you moving from one end to the other, with the occasional gated checkpoints where you'll have to fight off a load of different enemies before unlocking the next door and progressing. Now combat's reasonably interesting. You'll have a couple of different skills, but before you get to any of that, the game rules have to be decided. This is a very funny sequence that sees all of the people, the enemies and yourself, selecting from packs of cards, which will determine the different skills you have. Now the first of these are known as BS cards. I'm not going to say the full word, but I'm sure you can fill in the blanks, and the enemy and yourself will pick their own BS cards. These are only usable a limited number of times, like being able to grow giant and toss enemies about easily, or go invisible and heal yourself up. The enemy's BS is a little bit different. We'll talk about their BS cards in the combat section. Now aside from those, you have 2 other skill cards. They're set up and altered from that hub area. Now these don't replenish over time, you have to be peed off to use them. Literally, that is the mechanic. The more peed off you are, the higher your skill bar feels, and then you can use your things like healing, a fart escape that allows you to launch your character into the air and then glide around and attack from the skies, and later you can swap those out. For my particular favourite, the skill of squeezing a cat and it urinates over your enemies, forcing them to fight for you. As it would. Now while the skill system works reasonably well, having just the 2 skills, it means that to change them you actually have to remove what feel like should be base skills. What I mean by that is the fart escape move allows you to reach higher platforms, which feels almost fundamental to the game's design. There are usually ways around this, be it through springing platforms or going the long way round, but it feels much more clunky not having it. The same can be said for the other skill of being able to place a totem in the ground and heal everyone. You're going to die repeatedly without it. Sure, you can go and grab some cheesy poofs if you can find them, but for me I think it would have been better to have those two core skills separate and then allow you to augment with new abilities on top of that. Now thankfully there are different weapons, and this does change the way the game plays quite drastically. The default sword is absolute rubbish. You're whiffing it around, there's a semi-lock-on to enemies, and you have a dodge roll as well, but it's borderline useless. Now quickly switching this out when you're able with a sword and shield makes things much more enjoyable. Blocking incoming projectiles, shield bashing, it feels much more like you're in control of a fight rather than just flailing around. But an actual lock-on mechanic wouldn't have gone amiss. Now aside from your main weapon, you also have a secondary. This may be a bow and arrow or a wand, and my word, they've included gyroscopic controls and these work really well. They enable precision aiming while you still strafe left and right, and it's one of a number of accessibility options where they went a little bit extra in terms of controls and some of the visual options like colorblind mode. I really like the aesthetic of the game in terms of those cards, and they come in a number of different rarities. Now after most fights you get to choose a new card. These are your passive skills. They might increase the number of arrows you fire or how much health that totem restores. They're all very useful because every now and then the enemy will suddenly switch things up and use their BS card. These are quite funny, they're things like lightsabers for all of them, or it will take away your ability to fire arrows, leaving you with a weird ball of string, a reference to those BS moments in games where suddenly something ridiculously overpowered comes along. If you fall during combat, your teammates can revive you by standing close. You can also return the favour. As I mentioned, they're actually good enough in terms of AI to get you up multiple times, and they will need to because it's not an easy game. Initially, I'll say that the difficulty comes from a slight lack of control, not being able to lock on, a general floatiness to the combat, and the starter gear really goes together to make you feel that way until you change them out. Still though, you'll be facing in the wrong direction at times, your attack will send you off a ledge, or the enemy will just ignore your attacks, or your blocks, and hit you anyway. From stage to stage they do throw in new ideas, things like being pursued by this fire-breathing truck, or having to light torches from one to the next. But again they felt dated and a little uninspired, like the developers knew they had to do something, but weren't entirely sure what. There are a few nice little secrets though, some Easter eggs that you can find, and some of the areas that are a bit more open, that allow you to go slightly off the beaten path to find hidden treasure chests and the like. The boss fights are maybe one of the standouts for me, but they also highlight the game's combat weaknesses. I think the best way to highlight what I'm talking about, because it's a combination of not only the actual attacks themselves, but also the sound and audio that you're given. Here is how the game actually sounds when you're attacking enemies. So no screen shake, no real weapon sounds in terms of swinging and impact, and here's how it feels like it should sound. All it would take is a little tweaking to make it feel like you're swinging a weapon that's actually made of solid matter, and it would be far more satisfying to do so. As it's set around a big group of kids playing, enemy variety is also a little lacking. There are those that fire from range, those that come and attack up close, and occasionally somewhere in between. I can guarantee that with a group of friends it'll be far more enjoyable, and it's not that I don't enjoy the game because I love South Park and I can overlook some of the jankiness, but there's a lot more that they could have done here. Just look at any good beat 'em up for your combat, and you need that crunchy, impactful, no pun intended, punchiness that this just lacks. There are a few slightly deeper systems. There's a skill tree filled with different perks that'll increase your health, stamina, and that uses some of the dark points, which is just another currency that you'll find in the game, and there are dark cards that a particular character can give you to boost some of your other skills. I just wish the gameplay matched the storytelling, which unfortunately it doesn't. Story and gameplay combined score 12 out of 20. Controls, it's really nice to see them use gyro, but the lack of a lock-on mechanic within a title like this feels unusual. And the camera sometimes gets out of hand and finds itself in that very 90s place of being stuck, or you yourself may join it. Controls also score 12 out of 20. South Park Snow Day runs on the Unity engine, and I think they've actually done a reasonably good job. It's running around 30 FPS. I say around, there are a couple of drops down to about 28, and also you can see a couple of frame drops here and there, but generally it's quite good, particularly for Unity, and feels quite smooth when you're playing. Now alongside that we have handheld mode. It's nice in handheld, and performance remains good. It feels to me like they've been really successful at merging 2D and 3D. In cutscenes, characters are always face on as they would be on the TV show, and it doesn't feel forced from a visual perspective. In fact, that 3D really heightens the experience. While I do enjoy the snowy theme and small touches like seeing your tracks in the snow, they're certainly nice, it does slightly hinder the palette that they have to play with. Still, I'm really not going to be the guy to complain about too much snow in a game called Snow Day. Load times are also reasonable. Visuals and performance, they score 16 out of 20. The music here is fantastic.
Weapons are nice, new kid, but this game's also about using cards.
I was really impressed with the epic score that underpins the experience. The voice actors also do a great job. The lines of dialogue are quick and witty, and they keep that more stale gameplay going by constantly making you laugh out loud with absolutely outrageous lines of dialogue. Juxtaposed to both of those though are the less than stellar sound effects. As mentioned, your weapons sound like you're swinging nothing, there's no impact on enemies, and in a game where you'll be swinging your sword for 90% of the time, that is a major sound issue, and it makes no sense to me whatsoever. Sound and audio combined scores 14 out of 20. South Park Snow Day will retail at £24.99, and I think that's pretty smart pricing. Let's be honest, this doesn't feel AAA, and South Park fans, there is going to be more than enough here to keep you entertained, but I think most people would still be waiting for a sale. There is a physical of this that can also be had slightly cheaper already, about £21 here in the UK, and then it starts to get a little more appealing. While I wish it had local co-op, with a few mates online, I'm sure this would be quite fun, but I think you could still push through it reasonably quickly. It feels a little like they've set this up for further content to be added later down the line. I think it's a reasonable price. I give value 14 out of 20.
Hold on, fellas. The new kid doesn't know how to dodge.
In its best moments, South Park Snow Day is fun, but it doesn't do anything that games 20 years ago didn't do, and sometimes doesn't do the things it does do, as well as those titles, leaving me feeling a little dejected. In its best moments with a group, I'm sure you'll have a good laugh, but not a game I would call essential. It gets a SwitchUp score of 68%. Lovely stuff, let me know in the comments, is this one you're interested in picking up? As I say, if you're a fan of South Park, it's very, very funny, and the story side, it may be worth the asking price alone, but there are some big choices here I just don't understand. Thanks to all of you that enjoy the content, to our Patreons, our members, and as always, for all things Switch all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys, see ya!